Welcome to this episode of Wayward Writers. We are very grateful today to have the amazing Kendra Levin with us. I'm going to go ahead and just tell you a little bit about her. Kendra Levin is the editorial director of Simon and Schuster Books for Young Readers, where she supervises a team of 8 editors and edits award-winning and best-selling authors, including Kiyosh Monsef, Tracy Dion, Mary H.K. Choi, and many more. Before joining Simon & Schuster in 2019, she spent 14 years at Viking Children's Books, an imprint of Penguin Young Readers, where she edited a wide range of children's literature. Her books have received awards such as the Prince Honor, the Theodore Seuss Geisel Award, finalist for the Morris Award, the Society of Illustrators Gold Medal, and New York Times NYPL Best Illustrated, and more. A semi-regular contributor to Psychology Today, Kendra has been working with writers as a certified life coach for over a decade and is the author of the self-help book, The Hero Is You, which I absolutely love and encourage all of you to read that.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I have started to observe as I have more clients that are becoming more and more successful that it's hard to be in a situation where you're with other writers and you feel like colleagues, and then all of a sudden one of you starts to pull ahead, or someone gets a big break and becomes New York Times bestseller or something like that. And I think it's hard for people left behind or feel like they're left behind to not compare themselves and things like that. And so we invited Kendra on today because we have heard her talk about this topic before and got a lot out of it and hope that you will too. So, Kendra, how does a writer define success in a writing career? And how do you think this definition might evolve over time?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I don't think there's really just sort of one answer to it, but I'll sort of do my best to have something to offer here. So everything I'm going to say is with the caveat of like we all live in the world. I can say lots of touchy-feely things, and I will. Um, and also, we all know it feels good to get that external validation, and that authors, writers are not in this for just to express themselves, but also to have their work be recognized and be read by people. And a lot of these external benchmarks for success, whether it's the bestseller list or whether it's winning an award or whatever it might be, they are ways to measure how many people may be getting exposed to your work. And that's, I think, what writers really want the most, is to have lots of people read their work. So I don't want to diminish the significance of that. And at the same time, I think because the ability to reach those benchmarks or to obtain those achievements is so out of your hands. Like when you're a writer
Yeah.
and you're trying to get published, there are so many things that are out of your control. And then when you're an author who's been published, there are still many, many things that are out of your control. It's one of the wonderful things about this business is that it does take a village, and that it's a real community kind of effort. And also, speaking from inside the publishing house, as the editor, there are so many things that are out of your control. Even when the whole house is aligned on a book and it's getting all of the marketing and all of the sales attention and all of the things, it can still end up not reaching people. So, because of all of that, and I think in any situation in life where there are just a lot of factors out of your control, you have to just come back to the things that are in your control. And so when you're an author, I think that what that often comes down to is what is the story that I want to tell? Why am I doing this work? What is it that I want to say? And how can I continue to hone my craft and make sure that whatever I write next is the best thing that I've ever written.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
that kind of comes into our next question is what strategies can we as writers develop for our own personal definitions of success that are not solely based on commercial achievements?
Yeah, a lot of that comes through finding for yourself a community of writers who are really focused on the work, on the craft, And yeah, like certainly those moments are going to come up, like you mentioned, Heather, when you are going to see somebody getting some accomplishment and you're like, I want that for me. It's very natural to
Mhm.
feel those feelings. And at the same time, I think if you have a community that is where everybody in the group is really in it for the passion for writing rather than for attention or for acclaim or whatever, then everybody in that group is going to continue to come back to the work itself. And how can I make my own work better? How can I help my colleagues to make their work better? So I think finding and having and participating in a community like that is a big part of it. And then I think another thing is just like have other stuff going on in your life. Like if you
Yeah.
are
Wait,
just
what?
totally focused on I know, right? It's a wild concept, but
That never
if you're
happens.
just focused on your writing and reading other people's work and books, and the publishing industry, and all your social media is people that are in publishing or in the book world, and all the information that you're consuming is about that. Like, yeah, of course it's going to start to stress you out at some point. So I think it's important to have other things that you're interested in your life that are totally different and totally separate, and friends and colleagues or people that you interact with that are in totally different spheres, partly just to have other stuff going on and also to get some
Mhm.
perspective. I think a lot of times the struggles that we deal with in our world feel huge, and not to trivialize them, often they are huge. And also, I know I have a friend who is used to work in publishing and now is a nurse, and she's always a good person for me to go to for a little perspective
Mhm.
because she's actually dealing with life and death. And it's just a different, gives you a different lens through which to look at some of the things that we struggle with in our world.
Right. It makes me think when you get around some people that are in publishing or not, and, how are you? And it seems like when we're with people that are writers and creators, it's like, well, I'm working on this, or this was rejected, or I'm getting ready to go in the query trenches. And it's like, no, how are you? You know what I mean? And
Right,
and
right.
we get become so hyper focused sometimes if we have these goals. And so I think what you're talking about, perspective, that is huge, and giving our brain time to just be distracted with something else that brings us joy. So, in what ways can understanding our own core values and motivations help us define our own personal success in writing, how we define it ourselves?
Yeah, I think that's really important because it's really easy when you're looking outside of yourself at other people's accomplishments to get envious or feel some kind of way about them when what that person has achieved may not even be in alignment with what's
Mm,
important to you. So I think it's definitely really valuable to check in with, yeah, what are my values? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to accomplish, and why? Why is it important to me? What's my mission? Because I think then if you can kind of codify that a little bit, then it's something that you can always come back to remind yourself, like, hey, I'm on a different path than this or that
correct.
person. I've experienced this in my personal life because I went to NYU for dramatic writing, so that's playwriting and screenwriting. And a number of friends of mine and people that I went to school with are now achieving really incredible success in the theater world and in the film and TV world. And it's really exciting to see it happening. And I definitely have those moments where I'm like, hey, that like could have been me, quote unquote. And then I kind of go like, oh, well, but you know what? That's like not what you were trying to do all these years. Like that's not the path you've been pursuing. Like your interest is more in this work. It's editing, it's coaching, it's helping writers um, holistically connected to themselves and their work. And that's what really gets me excited, and I really love it. But it's having that little moment of recalibration. So it's not about never feeling
Mhm.
those feelings. It's about having something that you can connect back to when you do feel them.
Yeah, and we're
Yeah.
all at different stages, not only in our writing and craft, but in our life. Some of us are raising children. Some of us children have left. Some of
Right.
us don't have children. Like there's all different things, and so it's not apples to apples that you're comparing. And thank goodness, because we can all help each other on this journey. What are some things you did during this season in your life, and things like that, which makes it a wonderful thing.
Yes, and I love what you just said about seasons of your life, because that's something that's so important for writers to keep in mind too, is that we experience life in seasons, we experience careers in seasons, and it's not going to just be that super fruitful, thrilling summertime all the time. I haven't read that book, Wintering, but I have been hearing such good things about it. And from what I gather, it's about how that period of going inward and huddling up and germinating within yourself is so important
Mhm.
for you to ultimately be able to emerge from. And I think that rather than fighting the nature and trying to always be in one mode, I think we need to really embrace those seasons and just make the most of each one as they
Mhm.
come.
Yeah, I agree. I think too, one thing people do a lot is they like hyper focus on book sales. They hyper focus on getting that award or that achievement. Are there other effective ways for authors to measure their progress and success beyond those things?
Yeah, it sort of goes back to what we were talking about before, but I think it's really about just doing your best writing and unlocking new achievements in your own work, where maybe you usually write in the first person and you try out the third person, and at first it's not very good. And then you keep working on it and then you get it there, and then ultimately you are really happy with it. Something like that, like trying something new, taking on a challenge of something that you don't feel that you're particularly good at, and really working on it until you master it. Again, that's the realm where you do have control, is how hard you work and how much care you put into your own process and your own cultivation of your craft.
Mhm.
That's great. I think for me, the struggle is engaging that, like for yourself. Like, how would I qualitatively gauge my own success when I'm writing or improving my craft, or what's the reader impact? Like, how do you know how many readers are really loving your stuff? That's another thing my authors really do a lot is, and I tell them not to, is they read their
Oh,
reviews,
Oh, yeah,
and you can have 10 really positive reviews, and then they'll get one negative review, and that's the one they focus on, right?
of
So,
course. Yeah, because the
uh,
negative review is the saber-toothed tiger. We have it deeply encoded in our brains to be much more alert to danger than to things that are nice and
yeah.
positive and make us feel good. So that's why. But yeah, that's why I think it's healthy to not read your reviews. And to answer what you were saying, I think I think again, it's like you need that community of
mhm.
writers to be a sounding board and to help you know when you're reaching new levels with your work.
That's good. Critique
You know,
groups.
we all, right, love seeing on social media or someone sharing at an in person event a sales achievement or a contract. But also, like, I love reading and getting those small, like, intimate where you're at a school visit and a child comes up to you and they already have your book and they already had it signed from your
Mhm.
last visit and they ask you to sign again and they're 2 years older. Like, that moment is as precious and as successful. And I think, and I encourage all of you, let's share those moments too, because those are some of the reasons for some of like why we do this, right? That reader that never likes books fell in love with yours. And that's not really quantitative, but it's still a success. And that's what keeps us going when our well feels dry.
Yeah, absolutely. I love when authors
Yeah.
share letters from kids with me. It's always so rewarding, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what this all about is all about. I should say too, I really don't want to be diminishing the significance of tangible benchmarks of success, like i.e. making
Right.
money. Um,
Right.
I don't. It's We're mostly here, I think, to be talking about writing as an
Mhm.
art, but for many people are trying to make a living doing it too, and that intersection of art and commerce is really messy, a really messy place. And I think that there are a lot of inherent flaws in the whole way that the publishing industry is set up and has been from the very beginning, that make it so challenging for people to actually make money at this and to make a living at it. And I don't want to be diminishing that and how important and real that
Absolutely.
is. And one of the flaws of the way that it's set up is that it's an aspect over which an author doesn't have a tremendous amount of control, which is a
Right.
source of a lot of frustration for people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, what can you recommend any methods or tools that we can use to gauge and track, our successes and our progress?
It depends on what feels meaningful to you when it comes to success or to progress. Like something that I talk about in my book, The Hero Is You, is taking satisfaction from just like achieving goals, setting out a goal for yourself, making a plan, sticking to the plan, giving yourself some kind of like check-in points along the way where you can validate yourself a little bit, so you're not just waiting for this one big goal to wrap up, but you have these kind of nice moments to feel good on the way there, and then achieving the goal. And that is so much more than most people ever do.
Yes.
It's very hard to achieve a goal, period. We hear about it every January when people are making their
Sure.
resolutions, and it's like, oh, wow, we'll see. So I think tracking your progress toward achieving a goal, that's something that where the ball is in your court, whether it's like finishing a manuscript or that kind of thing, as opposed to setting a quote unquote goal that is something that you can't make it happen to get on the bestseller list, or you
Right.
can't make it happen to get such and such starred review. So taking these things that you can have agency over and giving yourself a structuring them so that you'll get to a point where you can be like, I did the thing. And then really
Yeah.
taking the time and the space to celebrate that moment and not focus on, okay, well, now I need to da 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 and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But to kind of be like, oh, wow, look, I did it. I'm going to really treat myself to a cupcake or like
Yeah.
whatever, like I'm going to do something to mark this
I
moment.
love that. I know at our last and first retreat we had, that was one of the things we started with on the first night, was sharing our goals. And it was
Yeah.
so fun because throughout the weekend there was 19 other people being like, "Hey, how's this going?" You know what I mean? And
Mm,
that synergy
Yeah.
is unbelievable. And I will say, I think it's great sharing with someone. Write it down or share with someone. Right now I have a critique partner that has a puzzle that I desperately want to put together, and she is holding it until I finish one of my writing goals. But like, I now it's like even more exciting. Now it's not just about the goal, but I get this reward to actually take time and sit down and put together a puzzle, which sounds probably fuddy duddy, but I love it. I'm excited. So like
no, I
those
mean, but
little
it's,
things make it more attainable, or it feels more attainable, and not just about the writing, because it's not the end there, right? Then, like you said, there's another goal, but like you said, pause to celebrate that you've achieved the small wins along the way.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love what you're saying about accountability and kind of drawing other people in to participate in accountability for you, because the word accountability sounds a little heavy, but it actually, as you're describing, can be a lot of
Mhm.
fun to just
Mhm.
involve somebody else in your dream
Right.
and to say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do and I want to share it with you so that you can, whatever is helpful to you, check in with me and see how I'm doing, or like, yeah, give me a little
A
reward
carrot.
that comes from you. Yeah, a little carrot, a little something. I think that that is a big part of what helps people to actually achieve their goals. And it really can make it a lot more fun and feel more like you share in each other's successes too. I think what you were talking about earlier on with sort of looking at other people's successes with envy, I think that feeling is exacerbated when you don't feel that you have had a personal investment in their process. When
Mhm.
I see authors really championing each other and shouting about each other's successes, it's because they've known each other from the beginning and they've really been included in the process and they've grown up together as writers, and been there for all the earlier drafts. And once you've had that experience with somebody, then you don't really as much feel like, oh, that should have been me. And you feel more like that I share that person's success. Like a win for them is a win for all of us.
Absolutely.
I really like how authors can constructively use comparisons with others to motivate themselves without falling into that trap of envy or self doubt by being involved in each other's process, right? Like being a champion for each other's process. I think that's brilliant.
This just came to mind when we were talking about that. Obviously, envy is a natural emotion. But if I don't know the author and they're having this success and I have this envy, is that a reflection of something that I need to work on for me? And if so, is that generally the same type of things that maybe I'm not setting goals for myself or I'm not achieving those goals? Because when you feel that envy and then once you're done there, like look inward, like what can I do to maybe either not feel that or
Stop
yes,
comparing yourself
thank
with
you.
someone else.
Yeah, so I think there's an outward component and an inward component. I think first you can take some of the pressure off of yourself by recognizing that we live in a society here in the United States that's very achievement obsessed, and that puts also just a lot of value on kind of individual achievement stories. And other cultures aren't necessarily that same way. So it's not a universal way that things just are. And it's very much woven into the very fabric of this country and its history and the way that white people came here, what they came to do in the beginning, and why they came, and just like the whole history of the United States and how our culture evolved from there. So that's one piece of it, is like you can take some pressure off yourself and be like, all right, this is the environment that I'm in, and I'm a product of that environment. Not to just throw up your hands, but just to put yourself into
Mhm.
context, right? Then, you can't do a lot about
Correct.
that, but you can do something about yourself, and so that's the inward piece. And I think on that front, yeah, it depends on you and what it is that's evoking those feelings for you. So I think if you're feeling that envy, you catch yourself feeling that envy, maybe the place to start is to ask yourself, like, like, get
Right.
curious, right? Curiosity is my favorite emotion. And I encourage you, rather than judging yourself or being like, I shouldn't be feeling this way, or trying to punish yourself or whatever, to just get curious and be like, well, I noticed that I'm feeling very envious of so and I wonder what that's about. And just start with that line of inquiry and see where it leads you. And it may reveal something that you wouldn't have expected. And I don't know what it's going to
Sure.
be. I think it's going to be different for everybody in every situation. But I think starting with that curiosity is a good way to follow the trail of breadcrumbs to something that's going to offer you some insight into yourself.
Yeah, that's a great Walt Whitman quote. So, what inspired you to write The Hero Is You? I know I read this about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's so inspiring. For those of you that have not read it, I recommend you get a copy today or tomorrow. It's very empowering. What inspired you to write this, Kendra? And was there a particular moment or experience with a writer that prompted you to create this work?
I really appreciate that you found so much in
Yeah.
it. It's great to
My
hear.
copy's on loan or I'd
Uh,
have it. But it
what inspired me to write it? I had been working in publishing and in the editorial space for quite some time. And I had also been doing my side hustle as a life coach for writers. And I had also been a writer myself. As I mentioned earlier, I studied writing in college too. And so I'd just had all these different experiences working with writers. I've seen it from all the different sides. I was aware of a lot of wonderful books out there about craft, but just not so much as in the way of resources on process. And I was just finding more and more that process was really the place where people were needing guidance and also needing to connect with themselves. And I also just noticed that in the writers that I worked with, a lot of the same things would come up for people, no matter where they were in their careers or where they were in their lives. And so that was like percolating in my mind. And then I got interested in the concept of the hero's journey,
Mhm.
which now time has passed since I wrote the book. And I feel like if I had the opportunity to do it over again, I'd probably want to include some updates because I feel like there are a lot of aspects of the sort of archetypal hero's journey that haven't really dated that well. But that being said, I think there was something that really appealed to me about paralleling the sort of narrative archetype of the hero's journey with the experience of the creative process and the writing process, because it just felt like there were so many ways in which they were similar to one another. And I thought, given that that was the case, maybe there were some tools for writers and for artists that we could find in the hero's journey that we could carry over. So I started reading up on the hero's journey and reading Joseph Campbell, and I read The Heroine's Journey by Maureen Murdoch, and I just got really interested in archetypes and Jungian stuff, and wrote a book.
Just like
It
that.
took. I spent
Of
6 years
course.
writing a book. I don't want to make it sound like it was easy. It was really hard.
We appreciate that you did.
Oh,
Yeah, definitely.
thank you.
So we talked about how you use the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell's book as a metaphor for the writing process. Can you share how this framework can be applied to help writers navigate their creative endeavors?
In a kind of just a really short
In a
snapshot,
nutshell.
I would say when you are writing, and I think we've alluded to this earlier in the conversation, you can just feel like you're floating in space. You can feel like you're just so far away from the goal that you want to achieve and so lost in things. And it can be really, that can just be really hard, really demoralizing and frustrating. But if you can, instead of feeling like you're just in this floating in this void, if you see yourself as the hero of your own kind of adventure, and that the process of writing whatever it is that you're writing is this kind of journey with all of these really specific identified milestones of meeting the guardians and reaching a catharsis and all these like different kind of moments that happen in the hero's
Right.
journey. It just allows you to place yourself somewhere, and it allows you to see your narrative as ultimately a triumphant one, even if you're at the lowest ebb, the just dark night of the soul part of your process. You can still have that conception of the fact that like you're gonna get out the other side and you're gonna ultimately be triumphant. And this is something that's really been backed up by psychological studies, not about writers specifically, but just about people in general, that when they can see themselves as the hero of their own story and the moment that they're in life as just one moment in that narrative, it allows them to be happier, to have more meaning, more of a sense of meaning, more of a sense of purpose in life, and to kind of move through those difficult periods.
I love that. Just take a step back from yourself. I think that's the key, right? Take a step back.
Yeah, and to let storytelling and narrative be a tool for healing and be a source of support, and to put a picture frame around yourself and to say, all right, I'm placing myself in time and space. I'm not just moving through chaos.
And I know your book is
Yeah.
aimed both for the new and experienced writers. So, what advice do you have for seasoned writers who might be feeling stuck or uninspired?
I guess what I would say to seasoned writers is you've been here before and you got through it before. And I'll just say that because that's something
Mhm.
I often find myself saying to seasoned
Mhm.
writers, because everybody continues to go through it. There's not a point you reach where you're like, I've graduated, I'm done. Now writing's going to be easy from now on. Like that's just not a thing. Yeah, you know this. You've done this. This part is hard. You've seen yourself get through it before. You're going to get through it this time too. And something good's waiting on the other side. I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is, but let's get curious and find out.
So, after finishing The Hero Is You, what do you hope readers will do next? Do you have any recommendations for further reading or practices that they can continue their development?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in the back of the book, there's a bibliography of all the sources that I use. And I certainly
Yep.
recommend people looking at those to go more in depth on some of the topics that the book touches on. But beyond that, what I hope for people is that they will feel less alone and less like they're the
Mm,
only ones that have whatever issues they're struggling with in their processes. I hope that they will feel inspired, if they haven't already done this, to go out and connect with other writers and find community, because I think that's such a big part of weathering the life of a writer. I hope
yeah.
that they will feel connected to what their strengths are and be able to come back to those as touchstones when they are going through some of those difficult moments. And I hope that they will help other writers out, because that's one of the things that I really love about the hero's journey is the idea that after the hero goes through all these trials and emerges out the other side, they are now equipped to become the mentor and to help
Right.
the next hero who's going through their journey. And this sort of touches back to many things we've talked about today, that being a writer, because it can be so isolating, especially, like, it is all about supporting each other and building each other up and being supportive of one another in the community, and for opportunities to be the mentor for somebody else's hero's journey and
I
vice
love that.
versa.
That's wonderful. Thank you so
Yes. Thank
much.
you,
Oh,
Kendra.
for sure.
And thank you for your book, The Hero is You.
Yeah.
And it just totally affirms community. And we hope that if you aren't a part of the Wayward Writers community, that you join us and we will hit this path together. So see you next time. Thanks again.
Thank you.